My name is Alexander Hayes, and I'm 54 years old. Last Monday, I found documents hidden in my wife's designer handbag that destroyed 28 years of marriage in 30 seconds. It wasn't just divorce papers. It was a complete blueprint to strip me of everything I'd built from nothing. If you believe that loyalty and hard work deserve protection, please like this story and comment where you're reading from. What happened next is a lesson about what occurs when someone confuses your kindness with stupidity. My wife thought I was too trusting to notice. She had no idea I'd been paying attention all along. The rain hammered against my office window that Monday afternoon. I sat behind my mahogany desk, reviewing contracts for Hayes Manufacturing, the industrial equipment company I'd grown from a small garage operation into a $100 million empire. My assistant had just left for the day. The building was quiet except for the storm outside. My phone buzzed with a text from my wife, Catherine, working late again. Don't wait up. I stared at those words longer than I should have. It was the fourth time this week. Something felt wrong, but I pushed the feeling away like I always did. I'd met Catherine 28 years ago at a charity fundraiser in Boston. She was elegant, charming, and came from old money that had long since disappeared. Her family name opened doors, but their bank accounts were empty. I was the opposite. No pedigree, no connections, just a mechanical engineer with calloused hands and a dream. She saw potential in me, or so I thought. We married 6 months later in a ceremony her mother complained wasn't grand enough. I didn't care. I was in love. I worked 16-hour days building my business while she managed our social calendar and appearances. It seemed like a perfect partnership. That evening, I came home to our estate in the suburbs. The house was dark and silent. Catherine's car wasn't in the driveway. I checked my phone again. No new messages. I walked through the empty rooms, each one decorated by expensive interior designers Catherine had insisted we hire. Everything looked perfect, sterile, like a museum. I realized I couldn't remember the last time this house felt like a home. I poured myself a drink and sat in my study, staring at family photos on the wall. Our wedding day. Our 20th anniversary in Paris. All those smiling moments now felt like evidence in a trial I didn't know I was facing. Around midnight, I heard the garage door open. Catherine walked in, her heels clicking on the marble floor. She looked startled to see me still awake. "Alexander, you're up late," she said, her voice smooth and practiced. "Big contractor review," I replied, watching her carefully. She nodded, kissed my cheek with lips that felt cold, and headed upstairs. I'm exhausted. Long day with the charity committee. I watched her disappear up the stairs, her designer handbag swinging from her shoulder. Something about the way she held it, protective and close, caught my attention. She'd never carried it like that before. It was a small detail, but I'd built my fortune on noticing small details. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about Catherine's behavior over the past few months. The late meetings, the new clothes, the way she started going to the gym 5 days a week when she'd never cared about fitness before. The phone calls she'd taken in another room. I'd ignored all of it, buried myself in work, told myself I was being paranoid. But now, lying in the dark, all those ignored moments formed a pattern I couldn't unsee. At 3 a.m, I made a decision. I needed to know the truth, not accusations or confrontations. Just facts. Cold, undeniable facts. The next morning, Catherine left early for what she called a spa day with friends. I waited 30 minutes, then went to her closet. The designer handbag from last night sat on a shelf, exactly where she always left it. My hand shook slightly as I picked it up. I'd never gone through her things before. It felt like crossing a line. But something deeper than trust was pushing me forward now. It was survival instinct. I opened the bag. Inside were the usual items: wallet, makeup, car keys. Then my fingers touched something else. A thick manila folder, tucked carefully into a hidden pocket I didn't know existed. I pulled out the folder and opened it. The first page was a letterhead from Preston and Associates, a law firm I recognized as one of the most aggressive divorce attorneys in the state. My chest tightened. The second page was worse. It was a detailed financial analysis of all my assets. Hayes Manufacturing's valuation, our real estate holdings, investment portfolios, bank accounts. Everything was listed with painful accuracy. Someone had done deep research. But it was the third page that made my blood run cold. It was a handwritten note in Catherine's elegant script. Timeline. File after his Tokyo deal closes. Estimated settlement. $52 million minimum. Malcolm confirmed he can hide the Cayman account. I stood frozen in her closet, holding evidence of betrayal so calculated it took my breath away. Malcolm, that was Malcolm Pierce, her supposed financial advisor, the smooth-talking consultant she'd introduced me to 2 years ago, the man I'd trusted with our investment strategies. They weren't just planning to divorce me. They were planning to rob me. The Tokyo deal she mentioned was my biggest contract yet, worth $30 million. It would close in 2 weeks. She was waiting for me to be at my wealthiest before she struck. I carefully photographed every page with my phone, then placed everything back exactly as I'd found it. I walked to my study and locked the door. My mind was racing, but years of business negotiations had taught me how to think clearly under pressure. I couldn't confront her. That would alert them, and they'd adjust their plans. I couldn't act emotional. I needed to be strategic, calculated, and 3 steps ahead. I opened my laptop and began making a list. First, I needed to understand the full scope of their plan. Second, I needed to protect my assets. Third, I needed leverage. I picked up my phone and called someone I trusted completely. Thomas, it's Alexander. I need your help. How soon can you meet? Thomas Bradford had been my attorney for 20 years. We'd built my business empire together, and he was one of the few people who knew every detail of my financial structure. We met at his office downtown that afternoon. I handed him my phone with the photographs. He scrolled through them, his expression growing darker with each image. How long have you suspected? He asked. I admitted, not until yesterday. Thomas leaned back in his chair. Malcolm Pierce is dirty. I've heard rumors about him for years. He specializes in hiding assets for wealthy spouses before divorces. Catherine's working with someone who knows every trick in the book. Thomas pulled out a legal pad and started writing. Here's the situation. In this state, any assets acquired during marriage are subject to division. She's clearly been planning this for months, maybe longer. The fact that she's waiting for your Tokyo deal shows sophistication. She wants to maximize her take. He looked at me seriously. Alexander, we need to move fast. If she files first, she controls the narrative. We need to restructure everything before she makes her move. I nodded. What do you recommend? Thomas smiled, but it wasn't friendly. It was the smile of a man going to war. We're going to make her plan completely irrelevant. Every asset she thinks she can claim, we're moving it somewhere she can't touch. Over the next 3 days, Thomas and I worked in complete secrecy. We met at different locations each time. Coffee shops, hotel lobbies, even a park bench. I couldn't risk Catherine or Malcolm discovering what we were doing. The first step was creating a series of irrevocable trusts. These weren't ordinary trusts. They were sophisticated legal structures that removed assets from my personal ownership and placed them beyond the reach of any divorce settlement. Thomas had specialists draft documents that would withstand any legal challenge. Every signature, every clause, every detail was designed to be absolutely bulletproof. We worked 16-hour days, and I didn't tell anyone what we were doing. Meanwhile, I had to act completely normal at home. I came home at my usual time. I asked Catherine about her day. I smiled when she talked about her charity events and spa appointments. Inside, I was screaming. Every kiss felt like betrayal. Every "I love you" sounded like a lie. But I maintained the performance. I couldn't let her suspect anything. One night, she asked if I was feeling okay. You seem distracted, she said, touching my arm with false concern. Just the Tokyo deal, I replied smoothly. Big negotiations make me tense. She smiled. Well, it'll all be worth it soon. The double meaning in her words was like poison. By Thursday, the legal restructuring was complete. Hayes Manufacturing was now owned by the Alexander Hayes Irrevocable Trust, with a board of trustees that didn't include Catherine. My investment portfolio was transferred to a family foundation that supported engineering scholarships. The foundation's bylaws made it impossible for anyone to claim those assets in a divorce. Our real estate holdings were placed in separate legal entities that I controlled through complex ownership structures. On paper, I looked like I'd given everything away. In reality, I'd simply moved everything behind walls Catherine couldn't climb. Thomas called it the legal fortress strategy. I called it survival. The final piece was the offshore account Malcolm thought he'd hidden. Thomas hired a forensic accountant who specialized in finding concealed assets. It took him 2 days. Malcolm had opened a Cayman Islands account in Catherine's name 3 months ago. They'd been funneling money from our joint accounts in small amounts, probably thinking I wouldn't notice. The total was almost $2 million. My money, stolen systematically over months. The accountant documented everything: dates, amounts, transfer patterns. It was textbook fraud. Thomas added it to our growing evidence file. "This changes everything," he said. "She's not just planning divorce. She's committed actual crimes. We can use this." That weekend, Catherine suggested we have dinner at Marcello's, an expensive Italian restaurant downtown. She wore a red dress I'd bought her for her birthday. She was charming, attentive, laughing at my jokes like the old days. For a moment, I almost forgot what I knew. Almost. Over dessert, she reached across the table and took my hand. "Alexander, I know I've been distant lately. I'm sorry. I want us to reconnect." Her eyes were sincere, her voice soft. It was a masterful performance. I squeezed her hand and smiled. "I'd like that too." Inside, I felt nothing but cold calculation. She was softening me up, making sure I stayed unsuspecting until she was ready to strike. On Monday morning, the Tokyo deal closed. $30 million hit my company's accounts. I received congratulatory calls from partners and investors. Catherine made my favorite dinner that night, opened an expensive bottle of wine, and toasted to my success. "I'm so proud of you," she said, raising her glass. I clinked mine against hers, watching her eyes. She thought this was her moment. The money was in. Soon, she'd file for divorce and claim her share of everything. What she didn't know was that the money had already been transferred to the trust. The company accounts she researched so carefully were now just operating funds. The real wealth was untouchable. 2 days later, I got a call from Thomas. "She filed this morning," he said quietly. I was in my office. I felt oddly calm. "What's the complaint say?" Thomas read selected portions. Catherine was seeking dissolution of marriage, claiming irreconcilable differences. She was requesting half of all marital assets, spousal support, and possession of our primary residence. Her attorney had filed a motion for immediate temporary support of $50,000 per month, pending the final settlement. It was aggressive, calculated, and exactly what we'd expected. "When do I respond?" I asked. Thomas's voice carried quiet satisfaction. "Tomorrow morning, at the same courthouse, with a few surprises of our own." That evening, Catherine came home late. She walked into my study where I was reading. Her expression was different now. The warm, loving mask was gone. In its place was cold determination. "I assume you've been served," she said. I looked up from my book calmly. "This afternoon. Your attorney works fast." She crossed her arms. "This doesn't have to be ugly, Alexander. We can settle this reasonably. You keep the business. I get what's fair, and we both move on." I closed my book slowly. "What's fair, Catherine?" She didn't hesitate. "Half. I supported your career for 28 years. I deserve half of everything you built." I nodded slowly. "I see. And Malcolm? Where does he fit in?" Her face went white. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. "I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered. I stood up and walked to my desk. I pulled out a folder, one I prepared specifically for this moment. Inside were printed copies of every photograph, every piece of evidence, every document Thomas and I had collected. I laid them on the desk between us one by one. The legal documents from her divorce attorney, the financial analysis of my assets, Her handwritten timeline. Bank statements showing the stolen money flowing to the Cayman account. Phone records showing hundreds of calls to Malcolm. I watched her face as each piece landed. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice quiet but firm. Tomorrow, my attorney will file a response to your divorce petition. It will include evidence of fraud, theft, and conspiracy. That's not divorce language, Catherine. Those are criminal charges. She tried to speak, but I held up my hand. I've restructured everything. The business you think you can claim? It's in an irrevocable trust. The investments you plan to split? They're in a charitable foundation. The real estate? Protected by legal structures your attorney won't be able to touch. Every asset you researched, every dollar you counted, it's all beyond your reach now. Her hands were shaking. The confident woman from minutes ago had vanished completely. You have one chance, I continued. You can agree to a settlement I prepared. You get nothing from my business or investments. No spousal support. No claim to any property. But in exchange, I don't press criminal charges for the $2 million you and Malcolm stole. You walk away with your freedom and whatever's left in that Cayman account after you pay your legal bills. Catherine's eyes filled with tears, but they looked fake. Alexander, please. I made mistakes. We can fix this. I shook my head. No, we're done. You have 48 hours to accept the settlement. After that, I give everything to the prosecutor and let them decide your future. She stood there, completely defeated, before turning and leaving the room. The next morning, Malcolm Pierce was arrested at his office. Thomas had provided evidence to law enforcement, showing a pattern of financial fraud involving multiple clients, not just Catherine. The news spread quickly through our social circles. Catherine's phone rang constantly with calls from friends asking if it was true. Her carefully constructed social standing collapsed overnight. By that afternoon, her attorney called Thomas to discuss settlement terms. Catherine had agreed to everything. She'd sign whatever papers I wanted. Malcolm, facing multiple felony charges, was in no position to help her anymore. Their perfect plan had become a perfect disaster. The divorce was finalized in 6 weeks with no trial, no public drama, just quiet legal proceedings. 6 months later, I stood in a new office building across town. Hayes Manufacturing had continued growing, and the Tokyo deal had opened doors across Asia. The charitable foundation I created was funding engineering scholarships for underprivileged students. I'd turned Catherine's greed into something that would help hundreds of young people build better lives. My attorney, Thomas, became a close friend, someone I had dinner with regularly. One evening, he asked if I regretted the marriage. I thought about it carefully. I regret trusting blindly, I finally said, but I don't regret learning the lesson. He nodded. You did the right thing, protecting what you built. I smiled. I protected more than money. I protected my dignity. Last week, I received a letter from Catherine. No return address, postmarked from somewhere in Florida. Inside was a single handwritten note. I'm sorry. I was wrong. 3 sentences that came far too late to matter. I read it once, then filed away with all the other documents from that chapter of my life. Some people think forgiveness means forgetting. I disagree. Forgiveness means learning, protecting yourself, and moving forward. I built my fortune through hard work and careful planning. When someone tried to steal it, I used those same skills to defend it. The greatest gift Catherine gave me wasn't our years together. It was teaching me that kindness must be balanced with strength. I share this story so others know. Protect what you build, trust carefully, and never let anyone mistake your patience for weakness. If this story resonated with you, let me know where you're reading from in the comments below.